8 points clear at the top of the Premier League.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like this Liverpool team is a great Liverpool team, and yet they're 8 points clear of the top of the table. They just have this winning mentality, don't they, that Jurgen Klopp had and that Arne Slot has managed to cultivate. They're just in the groove.
They haven't played brilliantly yet, but when they do, that's ominous for everybody else.
They will have to play better, certainly against Real Madrid, because they weren't at their best, Liverpool, but they're 8 points clear at the top of the table, and I still don't think they've fully hit their straps yet, which is a worry for the rest of us.
At this stage of the season, is there now more an expectation that Liverpool go on to win the title?
The pressure is on Liverpool now because they're huge favourites. That's the reason. I think it's down to consistency. Liverpool have it, nobody else does.
And suddenly, they looked mortal, didn't they? Whereas they've looked immortal for the last 4 seasons. I thought it was a really worrying performance, and Pep said afterwards, didn't he, if Liverpool beat Southampton and we lose at Anfield, it's title over. And I've got to say, I agree with him. They're not going to come back from 11 points behind.
I think Arsenal are going to win the league. I know that is a statement, right? But where are we? We're on the November the 25th. I think Arsenal are going to win the league. So much to get through on this week's programme. Leicester have sacked Steve Cooper. Rueben Amorim has started his career as the Manchester United boss. Manchester City are in crisis. Are they? I think they probably are now. And it's been a big week for Chelsea as well, because they have continued to put results on the board away from home. Let's say a big hello to Terry Gibson first of all. You right, Tez?
I'm very well, Sam. Thanks for being on. Thanks for asking me on. Always a pleasure.
Terry, you obviously have watched European football for a number of years. If you look down the barrel of your camera at Alex Crook, can you see a resemblance with Ruben Amorim?
I hadn't thought about it before, but yes, I can now.
He says he looks like a sexy Ruben Amorim. Are you going for that? I'm not sure anybody else is, but maybe Mrs. Crook. Maybe not even Mrs. Crook, to be fair. Crook, all okay with you? Survived the storm?
Yeah, good. Yeah, had my first Christmas lunch last night, Christmas dinner last night, so gone early with that, but all good.
Yes, very early indeed. Let's concentrate on the football. Big weekend for Manchester City because they've been beaten again. But I think we should start with Liverpool because today marks the start of a huge week for Arne Slot. Well, Crook, you were on the south coast for Southampton 2, Liverpool 3. And there were some contentious decisions in that game, and there were moments where Liverpool were struggling to find their rhythm. They're going to need to up their game for the next couple because although Manchester City are in bad shape, they play them on Sunday with Pep saying if they don't win, the title's over, and Real Madrid in midweek. What did you make of them?
Well, it was a strange game, really, because Southampton gave them a fright, no question about that. But I never felt really at any point that they wouldn't win, partly because Southampton have this incredible ability to gift the opposition goals. And I think all 3 goals were entirely preventable from Saints' perspective. But they just have this winning mentality, don't they, that Jurgen Klopp had and that Arne Slot has managed to cultivate. Mo Salah is in tremendous form. 2 more goals for him. Probably should have had a hat-trick, actually, with the one that hit the inside of the post. They're just in the groove at this moment in time. And I asked Arne Slot after the game, does this give you confidence ahead of what is, as you've already mentioned, a huge week? And he said, we didn't need the confidence. We already had it. He pointed out that Man City have been the standard bearers when it comes to Premier League. Real Madrid, very much the flag bearers when it comes to Champions League. They will have to play better, certainly against Real Madrid, because they weren't at their best, Liverpool, but they're 8 points clear at the top of the table. And I still don't think they've fully hit their straps yet, which is a worry for the rest of us.
8 points clear at the top of the Premier League. I think only one team at this stage of the season has had a lead like that and then not won it. That was Newcastle in the famous 95-96 season. There was a situation, I think, in January 2000 and I'm going to get it wrong. I think it's 2018, 19, when Liverpool had an 8-point gap in January over Manchester City, but I think Manchester City had a game in hand and they surpassed them because they went on such a brilliant run, Manchester City. So it can be done. And when you've got a new team, a new manager in transition, an early lead like this can be eaten into because there are more games. But Terry, at this stage of the season, is there now more an expectation that Liverpool go on to win the title rather than a hope?
Yes, I think there is, and I mean, we played 12 rounds of action and an 8 point lead for Liverpool. I think it's down to consistency. Liverpool have it, nobody else does, and that's the problem. So we're looking at other teams towards the top of the Premier League, and we're thinking, yeah, they could win the title this year. I mean, it's but Arsenal have a little dodgy little run. Man City now on a interesting to see how Pep handles it because he's never had 5 games, 5 defeats on the trot with anyone he's managed. So it's new territory for him. So I think they've gifted Liverpool. Liverpool have been consistent. They've really been good, but they've been consistent, and nobody else has. And that often happens. But is there time for City in particular and Arsenal in particular to pull it back? Yes, there is. There's still plenty of games left to play. They're going to need to win those games against Liverpool when they do face each other, and hopefully try and claw back that deficit. But at the moment, the pressure is on Liverpool now because they're huge favourites. That's the reason. There's more expectation now that everyone believes now Liverpool should go on and win it, and we're not even in December yet.
Interestingly, and you sort of alluded to this, Crook, when you were talking about the Southampton game, have they played that well yet? I mean, there have been moments in games where they've been in complete control of matches, but there are also moments in matches where they have a wobble and they lose control of the game. They sort of almost doze a little bit. They sort of don't go off and finish the match the way that you would expect the Liverpool team of old to do. And that's part of the transition, having more control and trying to be a little bit more pragmatic, but at the same time still retaining a level of sort of control in the match. I thought they've been a bit lucky as well because there's games where I go back to the Crystal Palace game where Crystal Palace had loads of chances right at the end of the game. A game that Liverpool dominated, then sort of gave a bit of encouragement to Palace towards the end. They were lucky to get away with 3 points in that game. And I spoke to Arne Slot afterwards and he concurred with that. And even in the game against Southampton, I thought they could have given away not one, but 2 more penalties in that match.
Well, Russell Martin was very unhappy, wasn't he, about the Kelleher incident with Adam Armstrong? And I know you referred to it during the Sunday session. It's certainly in the we've seen the given type bracket. I didn't think defensively they were great yesterday. Obviously, no Trent Alexander-Arnold, so Conor Bradley comes in. I thought Konate struggled a little bit at times against Southampton's attack. But you're right, and actually, I've said it to you privately, and you give me a bit of stick about it, but yeah, it doesn't feel like this Liverpool team is a great Liverpool team, and yet they're 8 points clear of the top of the table. You've got to say Salah's playing out of his skin, and actually, as we're recording this morning, there's quite an explosive interview that's just dropped. He spoke to reporters outside St Mary's, Salah, and he's claimed that he's yet to be offered a new contract by the powers that be. I'm not entirely convinced that's the case, but it does suggest there's still a long way to go in terms of him committing his future.
Interesting, isn't it? Because every time he has a brilliant performance, he does sort of just sprinkle in a little bit of controversy dust, trying to sort of raise the stakes for the contract. And it is interesting, right? Because without him, actually, they wouldn't be as affected. He is playing out of his skin. He's come back and he looks like $1 million, and he is performing brilliantly. I disagree with Crook. I thought right from the beginning of the season, there's something about this fella on a slot, and something about this team which I think, hold on a second, I quite like the look of them. And they do have moments, as I mentioned beforehand, they have been a little bit fortunate, but you need that. And I think what you said at the beginning actually was the key. They haven't played brilliantly yet, but when they do, that's ominous for everybody else, Terry.
Yeah, and I think there was not criticism, but it was pointed out their fixture list at the start of the season was a little bit easier than others. So we're yet to see a first full round of fixtures, half a season, where they've played everybody. Man City coming up, that's going to be a big test. But salary's key. I mean, when you've got players like that in form, and you're looking around at the other clubs, nobody else has got a player like Mo Salah at the moment in the form that he is in. So you're looking at all their rivals. Arsenal haven't got that key player in attack. They've got great players. They've got really good players, but the match winner is Mo Salah. He's dragged them out of trouble on numerous occasions this year. He's playing out of his skin. He looks a super player. And that's key. So what is it? It's played 12, won 10, drew 1, lost 1. And some of those games could have gone either way. Some of those games, they could have drawn games. They could have lost games. But when you have a superstar like Mo Salah, how he's playing at the moment, that gets you out of trouble. It nicks you a draw. It nicks you that win. And that's how it is. So I think I would take it to the halfway mark this season and then look at the gap and then we look and see whether City got a chance, Arsenal got a chance. Liverpool will have a wobble during the season, so that 8 point gap can easily be narrowed. Once he gets to 4 or 5, then it's a different matter altogether. So I think it's too early yet to write everybody off. But they all need to do better, and Liverpool don't. They're doing fine, consistent. They've got superstar in Mo Salah. They're okay at the back. They're okay in midfield. They're good, but they're just being consistent each week and just dragging those points out.
So how are they going to get on against Real Madrid? Because that's the big game for them now. They've got a huge week where they play the champions of Europe and then play the champions of England. What should they expect from Real Madrid? Because you and I have worked on Spanish football this year. You work on it every single week and you see Real Madrid up close. And they've had injury problems, especially at the back.
That's an understatement. It's not. I mean, every injury at the back is catastrophic. Danny Carvajal out for the season. We got Eder Militao, just recovered from an ACL last season, done his other knee. He's out for the season. Lucas Vazquez, who is a makeshift replacement, he's out. David Alaba is still out. So Real Madrid, with Liverpool and people watching in the UK will see a different back four for Real Madrid. Fede Valverde, who's instrumental in midfield, is now right back. They've got a young 21-year-old centre-back called Raul Asensio. And Ancelotti has been reluctant to use young players, but he's had no choice in this one. Courtois is back in goal, so that's a big help. So at the weekend, they started with Fede Valverde right back, Raul Asensio, Rudiger, who's always fit and always healthy somehow, and Fran Garcia was left back. So that's not ideal facing Liverpool.
Where's Ferland Mendy? Is he injured as well now?
No, he was left out at the weekend. At the moment, it's 50-50 who plays left back, whether it's Fran Garcia or Ferland Mendy. I think rightly so. It's a competitive place up for grabs. And Ancelotti, I think he'll probably go with Ferland Mendy in the game against Mo Salah. But there's not many choices. There's no other choices left for. Let's talk about Tchouaméni playing centre back, which is probably one of the choices, but he's injured. So there's talk about Camavinga playing at the back, but because Valverde's gone into the right back position, there's a lack of numbers in midfield. So it couldn't be better for Liverpool. But at the weekends, Mbappe, Vinicius and Bellingham in a 3-0 win at Leganés excelled. They were super. So it looks like the best form of defence for Ancelotti and Real Madrid is going to be their attack. So
which means it'll be a great game to listen to on talkSPORT on Wednesday night as a result. Yeah. Every time we speak about Liverpool, though, Crook, we always say their next big test is to come. This week probably is an example of that. They always seem to jump over them, though. And if Real Madrid do have defensive issues, then I'm sure they'll be confident in being able to negotiate them. And then Sunday they take on Manchester City, who are in a tight spot after a 4-0 defeat at home to Tottenham Hotspur. And it was a calamitous game. And it was a moment, really, when you looked at the Manchester City backline and thought, there's serious work needs to be done here. This is a team that's coming to the end of its shelf life. They looked old. They looked like they're one of the oldest 11s in the league, didn't they? Especially that moment where Timo Werner gave Kyle Walker a 5-yard head start and still outpaced him.
Yeah, I think some of the language you used on the Sunday session was what I was thinking, really. There looked like a lack of intensity, dare I say, a lack of effort and a lack of belief amongst the Manchester City players. And suddenly they looked mortal, didn't they? Whereas they've looked immortal for the last 4 seasons. I think age has definitely caught up with Kyle Walker. I expect him to leave the football club in the summer, and I think you'll need some young blood in that position. But Tottenham just were hungrier for me, and it was strange because I think we all expected a reaction from City, given the news that Pep Guardiola had agreed to extend his contract. I thought it was a really worrying performance, and Pep said afterwards, didn't he, if Liverpool beat Southampton, as I'm sure he expected them to, and we lose at Anfield, it's title over. And I've got to say, I agree with him. They're not going to come back from 11 points behind.
Well, interestingly, they play Feyenoord on Tuesday night. This is a game that I think they would expect to win. It might be the match that gets them back on track. And I think they're in that position where they need that spark. They need something to happen that gets them going once again. And this might be it. And if that happens, we go into Sunday. It's a big, huge clash. And we're going to Anfield to watch it, Crook. And by the time we finish that game, we'll have a better handle on who is favourites for the title, I think.
Absolutely. I remember covering this game with you last year, and it was obviously one of the defining results of the season. City played really well at Anfield. I just don't know if they've got that type of performance in their locker at this moment in time. The form of Erling Haaland is a concern. Was it 2 goals in his last 7, I think, for Manchester City? And he's missing big chances. I think I heard on talkSPORT on Sunday morning, his XG over those 7 games is 8 goals. So he's still getting the opportunities. He's just not burying them with the regularity that he was. I think they've got problems all over the pitch. And I do think it highlights an underwhelming summer in terms of recruitment. Obviously, they sold Julian Alvarez, didn't really replace him, which means they've not got a plan B when it comes to Erling Haaland. I think Nunez is playing far too many games for a team at their level. I just don't see him as an elite player. Grealish is struggling for form. De Bruyne, again, I think is looking like a player in the veteran stage of his career. So I do wonder if we get to the end of the season with Pep now committing his future, if City are in need of a bit of a rebuild.
Interestingly, everyone talks about Rodri, Terry, but actually, when you look at the way that the team functions, I have a big problem with the fullback areas. Vardiol is a centre half playing out of position, not out of position. That's not fair. He's playing in a more adapted position over on the left-hand side. And if you watch the game on Saturday night, a lot of the chances that they had were sort of from wide positions. Vardiol had more chances, I think, than Erling Haaland. Erling Haaland did miss some big chances, but Vardiol had more chances than he did. And that was all about Tottenham's tactic. Let's just shovel them out towards the flanks. Let's keep them wide. Let's defend the penalty area narrow. Let's make sure that we protect that central area and let them, if they're going to have the ball, because they're going to, because they're Manchester City, go out wide. And I'm not necessarily sure that setup, I mean, who are we to question Pep Guardiola, but do they need a dynamic fullback that goes down that left-hand side, maybe overlaps whoever it is, Grealish or Doku over on that far side, or underlaps? And same on the other side. Is Walker able to get up and down now, or is he playing as that sort of almost extra centre half that comes across into a 3?
It is hard to identify, and I think we have to look at it, analyse it. At the weekend, City could have been 2-0 up against Spurs when Haaland had a couple of chances.
In the first 15 minutes.
Exactly, and then after that, it's every attack that Spurs had, the weaknesses were exposed. And the first goal, when Maddison breaks into the box, when it goes out wide, it was... Kulusevski is a fine player, but he's not the quickest. And him and Gvardiol making that run out towards the right wing to get the ball, it was like, it looked like both of them were struggling, were toiling to get there. It wasn't the quickest race. So a quicker fullback there would have dealt with that. The cross wouldn't have come in and Spurs wouldn't have been 1-0 up. But it just goes to show how fragile their confidence is. That for, I think it was 12 minutes, they were on top and they looked like looked like they were back to something approaching what we expect from Man City. And then once that first goal goes in, because it's basic errors, you see Kyle Walker and John Stones pointing at each other at the far post, who let Maddison in, who Gundogan doesn't track him, and that's that type of stuff that Man City are doing. And then they all start pointing at Gvardiol as if to say it's your fault, and we haven't seen that from City. And that confidence that they've always had over the last decade now, it was exposed. It's gone and it's fragile. And that therefore, after going 1-0 down at home against Spurs, instead of just brushing it off and going back to their normal game, they didn't and they suffered. So it just goes to show even the best teams and the best players, they do suffer from a lack of confidence from time to time. And the fullback positions are a problem for City. The last goal with Timo Werner when he's knocked it past Kyle Walker, I've no idea what Kyle Walker is doing there because Timo Werner's rapid. Don't get me wrong. It's always going to be a good race. But as you said, it was a 5-yard head start and it took Kyle Walker an age to realise the danger. Now, whether he'd given up because of the scoreline or whether it's just, I would imagine, again, it's fragile confidence from a group of players that haven't had an issue with confidence for years. And all of a sudden, it's a wake-up call. They look like a normal set of players, a normal football team. Yes, they're missing Rodri, but they went into that game at the weekend thinking, right, we're going to get back on track. Good fast start. We're 1-0 down, and that's when it all fell apart.
Interesting, isn't it? Because there's probably not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 reasons why they've got themselves into this situation. The problems are probably myriad. We can speculate about what they are. But you have to say, when you look at them, they do look off the pace to me. They don't look as intense. They don't seem to have the desire to go and get over and stop attacks when an opponent is coming at them. And I wonder, how mentally tired it it sort of drains you when you've won for so long and you've had to be right at the top of your game for 5 or 6 years. When you've been listening to those messages, Terry, Pep is an intense character to be around. We've all experienced his company, even in polite sort of conversation. He's still quite an intense guy. So that over and over and over and over again for 5 years eventually does take its toll. And I mentioned this on the Sunday session. It's okay for Pep in a way because he can be intense, but he doesn't have to physically then go and perform the task. The players have to be mentally switched on to his level of competitiveness, and then physically they've got to go and do it as well. And after 5, 6 years and winning everything, there is an understanding that maybe they are a little bit mentally fatigued.
And this comes back to knowing when your squad is in need of rejuvenation. I think they needed to do more in the summer. The Ilkay Gundogan hero's return hasn't worked out particularly well because, again, he looks like a player who maybe isn't cut out for the top level in the Premier League. And I do think City, maybe as a result of the uncertainty around Guardiola, were guilty of resting on their laurels in that summer transfer window.
I must admit, I was surprised that Gundogan came back to City because of has been a fantastic player for City, and he peaked the year they won the treble, and then he goes to Barcelona. And last year, I'm looking at him at Barcelona and thinking, he looked such a different player playing for an all-conquering Manchester City who dominated every week, who looked fantastic every week. When he was at Barcelona last year and they were a struggling team, they weren't really getting things together. He was exposed in midfield. But I was really surprised. There weren't any tears from Barcelona or their fans when he left because the season that he had at Barcelona. I was amazed to see that he came back. And when you see the performance at the weekend, it is kind of what we saw last year at Barcelona, in a team that are getting up and down the pitch, that are not in great form, suffering with a little bit of lack of confidence. And Gundogan was exposed. So I was amazed. That type of signing is probably the last thing City needed. He's been a brilliant player. He has been fantastic. But did they need someone younger, someone more energetic, someone more youthful, rather than a sentimental return back to a player that wanted to come home after a year away? So that maybe is one of the mistakes that City made.
Interesting, isn't it? And I suppose one of the other things that it tells us is that we all get older. Age catches up with you, and you can't always be sprightly 25, sadly.
Look at me.
Look at all of us, Terry. Look at all of us. Right, okay, let's move on because Manchester United have started the new era. Ipswich Town were their first opponents, and although it got off to the perfect start for Ruben Amorim, it didn't end as well as he hoped. I was at Portman Road on Sunday, and there was a big banner which said, "Good luck, Ruben, make our team great again." I had a little bit of a sort of an echo of a Trump banner, which I thought was a bit strange, but I don't think it was necessarily meant in that way. I thought you couldn't have got off to a better start, but the same old problems very quickly came back to haunt Manchester United. There's a lot of work to do, and he knows that, doesn't he, Crook?
Yeah, I think you can see that by his face as the game went on. He was exasperated at times, very animated on the touchline, I have to say, and I think that's probably going to be the case moving forward. It was brilliant for 80 seconds, wasn't it? And then the old habits kicked in. I did get a message from Troy Deeney, actually, about 5 minutes into the game, and he said not just the goal, but already you can see more of an identity about this team than they had under Erik ten Hag. And you can. There's going to be a defined way of playing. I was worried when I saw the team sheet, Eriksen and Casemiro as the midfield combination, that they just don't have the legs, do they? So I was slightly surprised by that. But I think it just highlights that you've got a different manager, but ultimately you've got the same underperforming players who lack intensity, lack work rate, and Ruben Amorim is going to have to install that. And I think there's a lot of players who started this game yesterday that will quickly find themselves falling by the wayside.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the reasons that he started with Casemiro and Eriksen in midfield was because he had the opportunity to work with them. Mainu's not 100% fit yet. He has been working with him in a midfield too at Carrington. Luke Shaw's been playing on the left side of a back three in training as well. And we saw that later on in the game. All of these things may well end up coming into play, I think, later down the line, but he couldn't start with everyone he wanted to at the weekend because of injury issues. Ugarte and Mainu, I think, will end up being that midfield. That's, I think, almost a given. Ugarte was away, so came back late. Again, didn't have the chance to work with him, but he knows him well. He'll play with him and Mainu in the centre of the park. The wing-back situation is interesting because someone's got to play there, and it was Ahmad and it was Dallo yesterday. I don't know how long that experiment will go on for because you haven't got a left wing back because Dallo is not left-footed and Ahmad is really an attacker rather than a defensive right wing back. But we'll see how that materialises. The big question I wanted to ask you, Terry, was about Marcus Rashford's performance because he scored the goal. I mean, it wasn't a brilliant, clean finish, but it was a good enough finish to get in front. But what about his overall work rate? Because I would have thought yesterday was the day we were going to see him bust a gut.
And we didn't. It's interesting because when he broke into the team, I didn't see him as a winger. I saw him as a central attacking player. Maybe not back to goal, traditional centre forward. But over the years, his kind of identity has changed into being a player that likes to play in a wider position. Managers have picked him in that wider position, but he has all the attributes. And you look at a young player that made that breakthrough. He should be playing in a central role in attack by now. That should be his role. That should be his position. He's got all the skill in the world. He's got all the attributes you need to be a 20 goal a season player playing in that centre forward position, around that centre forward position. And when he gets off to the great start yesterday, you're thinking, right, now Amorim has obviously seen that over the years and thought, he's not a winger, he's not a wide player. I can, use him in a more central role. Is he better than Højlund and Zirkzee? Could be, probably. Maybe definitely over Zirkzee, but not maybe him and Højlund. It's a toss-up to see who plays up front down the middle. But I think it's something that Amorim has probably looked at over the years and thought, I can get the best out of him, playing him in a central role, because you can't play him as a wing-back now. So that's the big issue. And Rashford, it was the perfect start. Playing in a newer role, gets the early goal, and I was really looking to see him crack on from there. He didn't. Now, whether that's a reflection of the team as a whole, and, I don't want to sit here and start piling in on Marcus Rashford, but, he didn't get many opportunities, but I just think as a player with his skill level over the years and technical ability that we should have seen more. And maybe some of that is the reason is that he's drifted around in different positions. And I'd like to see him used more in the central attacking role, to be honest, and see how it develops from there.
Yeah, and that's a key thing. We don't want to pile in on Marcus Rashford. I think Garnacho was guilty of this as well. I was on air, we were talking, and Perry Grove said, what do you make of the intensity of Manchester United's performance and what they've been like without the ball? He said, you're there, you're watching it. And as he was asking me, I was watching the game unfold in front of me. And there was a moment where Rashford, and this might be because he's not used to playing this position, and Garnacho similarly because he's playing slightly inside in this 10 and there's new instructions here. But Ipswich have got the ball about 15 yards inside Manchester United territory. Most of the blue shirts are the other side of the ball, apart from the two central defenders. Rashford and Garnacho are behind the ball and Ipswich are in possession. I was expecting at that moment Rashford to sort of run round and try and cause problems for the player on the ball. It was only about 5-10 yards away from him. Garnacho similarly could have come from the other side. But they sort of drifted and it was a token gesture to sort of move towards that player rather than actually go and engage and make it difficult for the Ipswich player to make a pass. And I thought, you could have shown a real intensity there. It wouldn't have taken much to do that, but you decided not to do it. Now, is that instruction or is that because you haven't got the desire to get back and do the work? I can't work it out, but I think it's an issue.
I think it's a lack of desire and the fact that they've got away, those players in particular, with not working as hard as they should be under previous managers. And I think that is something that Amorim is going to have to change. Job number one is to change the culture of that dressing room. History tells us it's very difficult to do because there's players there who've survived 3 or 4 different managers, and that makes it difficult for the guy who's in control to fully command the respect of the dressing room, because there's always going to be underlying impression amongst some players that this manager is just passing through and we'll be on to a new one in 2 years. And I think that's a big battle that Amorim has to overcome. I was surprised at the lack of intensity.
He's done well to give the impression that he's here for the long haul.
Yes, he has. And he's also done well to give the impression that the players are putting in maximum effort, because I still don't think it was maximum effort. I expected more from a Manchester United team under a new manager. I thought they'd win yesterday. I thought they'd win comfortably, particularly when they got the early goal. But Rashford is a prime example, and we don't want to make it a witch hunt and single out individual players, but he's got the perfect start to a new regime, and his performance hasn't kicked on. He's very quickly reverted to type, and I think Amorim will be very concerned by that.
Amorim now can show that to them on film, on footage, and just the 2 players there. It's simple. There's been cross messages over the last 6 or 7 managers that Rashford's played under. Different instructions, playing out wide, playing down the middle, closing down, pressing high, dropping deep. Now, this is a really good chance for Amorim to just show those clips to those 2 players. Don't haul them over the coals in front of all the others, and just bring them in and say, look at this. Look, are you happy with that? Look, it's obvious. We need more. This is what I expect. And to a degree, if you don't do it, I'll find someone else that does. So that's where the manager starts from after this match, getting across his ideas rather than Ten Hag's and Louis van Gaal and all the other Solskjaer, all the other managers that have coached Marcus Rashford. There needs clarity now from, if you don't do this in this position, you won't play. And don't come to me moaning about it. This is what I expect. So it's a good opportunity for Amorim to show the players from day one stuff that he won't accept, to be honest.
A good opportunity on Thursday night, actually. They play Bodo Glimt in his first home game, and I think this is the perfect game for them in some senses, because Bodo Glimt are 1 point ahead of Brann in the Norwegian First Division, and their final game of the season is on Sunday. So they've got a title decider on Sunday, and they've got Manchester United away from home on Thursday. So the idea that they're going to be at full tilt for this game might be a little bit ambitious. I think they might rest 1 or 2 of their key players for it, because they've got that big, huge title decider at the weekend. Game they think they probably should win against Leicester, who are towards the bottom of the table. But I think it's a real opportunity to get the feel-good factor, because if you're at Old Trafford, 75,000 people, you win well in your first game there, all of a sudden things can change. I don't know if Rashford will start this game. It might be Højlund. He might mix up the team, might give it a bit of a twist, because we're about to go into a very busy period, and we might have a few of those older players rested for Thursday night too.
Yeah, although first home game of a new regime, I think it's going to be a strong United side. I think he's going to want to win this game. Again, will Ugarte come into midfield? I think you're right, by the way. I think the makeup of that midfield will look very different as time goes on. But I think this is a great opportunity, not just Thursday night, but Everton at home at the weekend. I mean, Everton not beating a Brentford team who hadn't won away all season, despite the fact Brentford had a player sent off, I think tells you where they're at this moment in time. I fear for Sean Dyche. I don't see any scenario in which he starts next season as the new Everton manager. So these are 2 big games for Amorim, and they simply have to get 6 points, because you get into December, they've got Arsenal away, they've got a Manchester derby that you and I are going to be at, so it gets much more difficult, and I think he'll be frustrated that it's not going to be 9 points out of 9, because again, Ipswich away from home, with no disrespect to Kieran McKenna and what he's doing there, that was utterly winnable for United, and it's poor they didn't manage to do that.
Okay, let's crack on and wrap up some of the other big stories from the weekend in the Premier League and look ahead to what's going to happen next. Focus a little bit on the London boys, because Chelsea beat Leicester by 2-1. Arsenal victorious as well against Nottingham Forest. Good performance. Their next game is against West Ham United next week. So it's a tough game for them. And Chelsea have got Aston Villa. 2 tough games. But I think these 2 teams are back in the mix now, Terry, Chelsea and Arsenal. I mean, Chelsea have obviously slowly but surely sort of eked their way up the table. They're third as we speak. But Arsenal have got back to winning ways. The first time they've won a Premier League match in nearly 2 months.
which is astonishing. That then it goes back to what I was saying earlier about Man City. They've lacked consistency. Liverpool, the only team that have had it. Arsenal being hot and cold this season. And Chelsea's just quietly crept along, and nobody expected this from Chelsea when they had 200 players in their squad in the summer, and there was drama every single week and every single day, and this player was upset and that player was upset. And then all of a sudden you're looking at Chelsea and it's the same group of players. The squad is miraculously manageable now. And they're just they're the second most consistent team in the league this season, and nobody expected that from Chelsea. We didn't expect consistency. We expected maybe, some top level performances from individuals while Enzo Maresca gels the team together. What team is he going to pick? He's got hundreds of players to pick from, but he's narrowed it down. They look they look like a group that's got really good bonds now. There's no outsiders. And they're playing, consistent football week in, week out, and they have outstanding footballers and young footballers. So the future looks really bright for Chelsea. But that what you just said about Arsenal is astonishing because, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were genuinely looking at them as possibly the best team in the Premier League at the moment. And then they've had that slip up, which will happen to other teams. Liverpool will have it. So I think that Arsenal are not out of the running. But it's astonishing and they made light work of this game against a team that's having a really good season, that are difficult opponents. They weren't in this game, and Arsenal won it comfortably.
Yeah, the first time that they've won a Premier League game since the 5th of October. So it's nearly 2 months. It's about 7 weeks since they did that. But interestingly, I thought with Chelsea, I think I've done my bit, by the way, Crook. You're going to be pleased with this because the one thing that is very consistent about Chelsea is that they give away a penalty in almost every single game, right? But I thought this needs attention. This needs attention. So I was speaking to Enzo Maresca, doing an interview, and I said to him, "Are you a little bit concerned about the fact that you've conceded the most penalties in the Premier League this season, and you've done it in 4 games? That's that's the most. Are you worried about it?" And he went, "I didn't know that. Maybe I need to look at it." So if Chelsea go on and achieve anything this season, I'm taking credit for it, right? Because I highlighted the fact they keep giving away penalties. Maybe that's going to be part of the team talk next week.
It's a little bit of a worry that a highly paid Premier League manager hasn't noticed it, to be honest, when you look at all the analysts that the clubs employ these days. But you're right, they are a team who give you a chance to score goals. And I think up against top opponents, that could be a problem. But certainly, it's been a brilliant start to the season from them. I was at Arsenal. I was impressed with Arsenal. I thought Forest were really poor, I've got to say. No Chris Wood from the start. Morgan Gibbs-White not available. I think we see just how reliant they are on him. But for Arsenal to be able to leave Rice, Havertz and Martinelli on the bench, presumably with more than one eye on this game in Lisbon in the Champions League on Tuesday night, and still run out comfortable winners, I think says a lot for Mikel Arteta. And actually, I liked his answer to me afterwards because I said that was a perfect day for you, wasn't it? You rested players. When Yeri comes on and scores, you got a clean sheet. And he said, yeah, but if we'd lost and I'd rested those players, they'd have killed me. So he's aware of the risk.
I think you're coming round to him, actually. I like him. I like him. I've got a lot of time for Mikel Arteta. But I think Arsenal are going to win the league. I know that is a statement, right? But where are we? We're on the November the 25th. I think Arsenal are going to win the league. There you go. I've said it. Keep hold of that. You can clip it up and throw it back at me later on in the season. Let's quickly talk about Leicester City. Why do Leicester City fans not like their head coaches? Steve Cooper is the latest one to go. He wasn't very popular. They didn't like Brendan Rodgers prior to that, and he won them the FA Cup. They didn't like Enzo Maresca, and he got them promoted straight back out of the Championship. They didn't like Whispering Claude Puel. Well, okay, I get that. But at least they were in the top half of the table. They didn't like... they fell out of love with Claudio Ranieri very quickly, by the way. They sacked him after 6 months after he'd won the Premier League, which is amazing. And they even fell out with Nigel Pearson, although they tell me that Nigel Pearson is probably the last one that they really, really were into. I don't get it. I don't get it. They've had a brilliant time over the course. They've probably been the best club to support over the last 10 years, Leicester City, right? If you're outside of the top 3 or 4, they've been one of the best clubs to support, haven't they? Why do they not like their head coaches, Terry? I don't get it.
I didn't realise that. And as you're saying that, I was thinking of the names you're going to come to. And as you were going, Brendan Rodgers and this one and that one, and how quickly they fell out with love with Claudio Ranieri, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea why that is. I don't know what they expect. I don't know what their expectation levels are. How they've changed after winning a Premier League title. That seems to have changed the attitude. And whether they think they should be having Pep Guardiola as their manager and you know, all these illustrious names that they think would come to Leicester City. They're good managers that we're talking about there, you know, with good reputations, but somehow the Leicester City supporters, when Steve Cooper got the job, immediately they didn't want him. They didn't give him a chance.
I think that was a bad hire. I think that was politically a silly thing to do.
And I think when the managers that are linked for the job now, they want that people will want that job. It's a good Premier League team. It's a Premier League job. It's one where they're not in a disastrous position, which is why I'm kind of surprised that Leicester have run the risk of totally derailing the season now. And it's a job people want, but that might turn one or two off that think well, they don't like anybody there. So it's kind of like Leicester have got to float it out there, the possible candidates, to see who gets the backing of the supporters, because when Steve Cooper got it, immediately no one was inspired at Leicester with the fans. The fans were no one was inspired by that choice, and they never gave him a chance from day one. Should he got the sack? I don't think he should have done, to be honest. But the change has been made.
It's so early.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of strands to this. One, I do think you can accuse Leicester fans of having delusions of grandeur because they won the Premier League title, because they won the FA Cup, because they were going deep into European competitions. But that was an anomaly, really, from when you look at the history, certainly the recent history of Leicester City. They are a lower half Premier League club at best. And actually, you look at the table, it's not terminal. But I think you look at the video of the players celebrating in Copenhagen, I think it was on Sunday night. I think that tells you all you need to know about the relationship between Steve Cooper and the dressing room. They never really bought into him.
Explain for people who haven't seen that exactly what that video showed.
Well, it's their Christmas party, as I understand it, and they're not due back at training until Tuesday. So clearly, they've been given permission by the club to go off and celebrate and toast the season. Harry Winks is in the video. I think Yannick Vestergaard is in it as well. Connor Cody, and they're certainly three players who didn't necessarily have a great relationship with Steve Cooper. I think it's a bit unfortunate for Cooper and probably for the players as well that the video footage has come out, but so be it. Leicester yet to release a statement about that. They might not release a statement because I don't think they've broken any club rules. But the players didn't buy into him. They didn't particularly enjoy his training, from what I'm told. And the owner didn't want him in the first place. If you remember, we covered the story on talkSPORT. Graham Potter had agreed terms and then asked for a little bit more time before signing on the dotted line. That made them go back to Steve Cooper, who, as I understand it, they'd already ruled out becoming their new manager. And I think, when you're appointed almost against the owner's wishes, you're on a hiding to nothing. I don't think from a fan's perspective, the biggest issue is the fact he was a Nottingham Forest manager and a legend, obviously, at the City Ground. It was that they didn't enjoy his football. But they haven't enjoyed anybody's football, so good luck whoever goes in there. I think they'll go back to Potter.
If you're Leicester, the job this season was to stay in the Premier League. And looking at the table, as it stands, their position in the table is not bad. Okay, so they're 16th. They've got more points than Ipswich, they've got more points than Southampton, they've got more points than Crystal Palace and Wolves. So, and surely after 12 games, you can't have established absolutely everything. It must be something behind the scenes. I spoke to Steve actually on Saturday afternoon because I did the game, Leicester-Chelsea, and he was in good spirits. He was in good spirits. I mean, I thought he was wrong to have a go at the referee for the penalty decisions because I thought that actually Leicester got away with maybe one, if not two red cards, definitely one. So I don't think the referee actually influenced the game as much as he suggested. But he seemed to be all right. He seemed to be pretty happy. He wasn't in a bad way. Either he already knew that they were about to give him the chop and he was sort of D-Mob happy, or it's come as a complete surprise to him. I don't know. I must admit I was a bit flummoxed, but I actually was on air and the statement dropped in front of me and Perry Groves was talking and I just went, "Stop! There's a big story." And I felt a bit bad about it afterwards, but that's what it felt like. It felt like, what? they've made this decision this early. It's quite a big thing to do.
I think he was stunned. I don't think he was expecting it. I also think he's a serial whinger, and I felt like that for a long time. And I wonder if the owner's looking at that and thinking, well,
he's a World Cup winner.
No, he's a whinger. It's always the referee's fault, and actually, it wasn't the referee's fault at the weekend. They were dreadful, Leicester, particularly in that first half, and maybe the fact he came out and gave you such a delusional interview played a part in the decision. You've got him sacked.
Are you blaming me? That's not true. I always think it's quite weird, though. I like Steve. I get on with him very well. But I do think it's interesting that he is the one who gives the referees so much stick when his dad refereed you, Terry.
I didn't realise that.
Keith Cooper.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that connection.
Mad, isn't it? And yeah, he's quite happy to have a go at the refs. It's crazy. Right, okay, one more thing before we go, because there was a lot of other games this weekend we haven't really touched on. Well done to Gary O'Neill. Excellent work. Yes, I'm delighted. Am I allowed to say that? I'm delighted for him. You're not going to get Fulham fans going to the ump because I was delighted for him. I actually think Fulham are a really good team, by the way, and that game probably 4-1 flat as walls. But anyway, I'm just saying for Gary, who's a friend of ours, well done. A couple of wins back to back. Please don't tweet me. I won't see it anyway. Crook, we're going to give you 30 seconds at the end of the programme to say something nice about Ange Postecoglou. Go.
Brilliant win. Spursy couple of weeks, lose at home to Ipswich, and then go and absolutely smash the champions.
Something nice.
Who have they got next? Fulham. Get your money on a Fulham win. No, congratulations. He got his tactics right. He made big decisions, didn't he? And I thought Kulusevski was brilliant.
Yeah, there you go. See, Terry can be nice occasionally. Tez, thank you very much. Good to see you. I'll see you very soon. I think we've got a game on the 21st December to do together for the television in La Liga. Looking forward to that. Crookie, I will see you on Friday, I would have thought. We're doing White and Jordan together, aren't we? So looking forward to that.
It might even be Wednesday. I've just had the call up to come and sit with you and Simon on Wednesday, potentially.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. See you then. All right. Thanks very much for joining us on Premier League All Access. We'll be back on Thursday to preview all of the weekend's big games.